Being diagnosed with type 2 diabetes is terrifying. And one of the first places that any healthcare provider will point a newly diagnosed type 2 diabetic to is the American Diabetes Association website, because they have lots of free materials to help educate a new type 2 diabetic on what they should and shouldn't do and what they can expect from type 2 diabetes. I'm Dr. Ken Berry, a family physician with 20 years of clinical experience, and I've went down the rabbit hole of the American Diabetes Association website for type 2 diabetics, and I'm going to share with you what I found. You may not believe it, but it's true. Many type 2 diabetics think there's just no hope for ever reversing type 2 diabetes. They think they are doomed to a life of weird food, lots of pills and injections, lots of diabetic complications, and an early painful death. Nothing could be further from the truth, but where are these type 2 diabetics getting this information? I'm afraid they're getting it from the American Diabetes Association. I went to their website, and there's actually a link. If you're newly diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, click on the link, and they ask for a lot of information from you: telephone number, mailing address, all of your demographic data. I'm interested to see if I'll start getting drug ads in the mail. I'll keep you updated on that. But they have a series of booklets for newly diagnosed type 2 diabetics. The first booklet is called Where Do I Begin? And so I downloaded this booklet, and you can do this too. I'll put a link in the show notes. And I want to go through this booklet step by step and show you the accidental misinformation in this book and how it can utterly confuse a type 2 diabetic, rob them of hope, rob them of their health, and guarantee them a life of diabetic medications and diabetic complications. This video, if shared with a newly diagnosed type 2 diabetic, could literally save their life. It could help them to reverse their type 2 diabetes and keep it from ever coming back. It could give them a lifetime of a normal blood sugar and a normal hemoglobin A1C. So please share this if you know a newly diagnosed or existing type 2 diabetic. Now here we are on page 4, and the ADA says when people first find out they have diabetes, they're often sad, mad, scared, or feel guilty. And I agree with this. I think that's true, but we don't want them to keep feeling that way. We also don't want them to feel powerless or hopeless, and that's what the remainder of this book is going to make the average diabetic feel. On page 5 of this booklet, the question is asked, what is type 2 diabetes? And I'm proud of the ADA for this, because that is the most important question that every type 2 diabetic should ask. And here's what they say. When you have type 2 diabetes, and this is a quote, your body does not make enough insulin or use it well, or sometimes both. Now, this is complete and utter misinformation. First of all, that's not even the diagnosis, or that's not even the definition of type 2 diabetes. Type 2 diabetics, without exception, are still making insulin, and their insulin molecule is just fine. If you check a C-peptide or a fasting insulin level on a newly diagnosed type 2 diabetic, they're going to be high. But according to the ADA, they're either not making insulin, or their insulin is somehow inferior. It's not shaped right. It's not formed right. But so this one sentence basically makes a type 2 diabetic think, well, I'm just broken somehow. My pancreas is either not making insulin, which is not true, or it's making some kind of weird mutant insulin that's not working. So I guess I'm just broken. I guess I'm at the mercy of my doctor and the ADA and these pills and injections for the rest of my life. So when you start out defining type 2 diabetes incorrectly, you're not educating a type 2 diabetic. You're miseducating them. And so immediately a type 2 diabetic is going to become confused. Remember these feelings that we were talking about earlier. Confusion doesn't help a type 2 diabetic. Understanding what type 2 diabetes actually is and actually what causes it would help a type 2 diabetic much better than misleading them. The next paragraph says, there is no cure for diabetes, but it can be managed. So immediately we're talking about medical management here. They do talk about diet in this booklet, and I'll get to that. It's not pretty. But immediately we throw the word managed in there, which implies medications, which implies prescriptions and lots of doctor visits. Again, nothing could be further from the truth. If you understand that type 2 diabetes is in fact carbohydrate overdose syndrome, which leads to hyperinsulinemia. Therefore, if you called it carbohydrate overdose syndrome, you would immediately know, oh, I'm eating too many carbohydrates. So if I stop doing that, my type 2 diabetes will get better and in fact reverse or be cured or go away, or however you want to word that. Now on to page 6, where the ADA says, checking your blood glucose or blood sugar if your doctor prescribes it. So every type 2 diabetic watching this, you absolutely need to monitor your blood sugar routinely, ideally with a continuous glucose monitor, so that you can learn from your blood sugar. Your body will give you feedback. If you wear a CGM, continuous glucose monitor, or check your blood sugar with a glucometer multiple times a day, 1 hour after you eat, you'll learn very quickly which foods spike your blood sugar, therefore lead to all the bad type 2 diabetes complications, and you'll learn which foods don't spike your blood sugar and therefore make your type 2 diabetes better. But they're implying that checking your blood sugar is kind of optional. You know, if your doctor prescribes it, then you should probably do it. Otherwise, we don't really have an opinion on that. The ADA should strongly recommend to all healthcare providers and to all type 2 diabetics that a continuous glucose monitor is mandatory in order to lower your A1C and lower your daily blood sugar. Now on to page 7. The ADA says that if you're overweight or obese, your provider or diabetes care team may suggest you try to lose some weight. That's true. Losing weight can improve your blood glucose. See, actually it's the other way around, because they do, when you lose weight, your blood sugar comes down. But actually, it's the blood sugar coming down that helps you lose weight, because when your blood sugar returns to normal, so does your insulin, and that allows your fat cells to actually burn off the stored fat. So you lose weight by lowering your blood sugar, not the other way around. Another little misspeak here by the ADA. Now let's look at this next. This is also on page 7. What does healthy eating really mean? Now, this sounds important, and indeed, healthy eating for a type 2 diabetic is the most important thing. It is 99% of the battle towards reversing your type 2 diabetes. So the first check mark says eating a variety of foods, including vegetables, whole grains, fruits, low-fat or non-fat dairy foods, healthy fats, and lean meats or meat substitutes. So let's go through this. Vegetables, yeah, eating vegetables is okay. Whole grains, wait a minute. Aren't grains high in starch? Isn't starch just a long chain of sugars? Doesn't the starch start to break down immediately in your mouth before you even swallow it and turn into sugar? Isn't any kind of bread, even whole grain bread, going to spike your blood glucose? Yes, it is, but yet that's the advice from the ADA. Fruits. Now, most people hear that and they're not thinking about raw, fresh raspberries, blueberries, strawberries. They're thinking about fruit smoothies and fruit juices, both of which are going to spike your blood sugar off the chart. Eating occasional fruit as a type 2 diabetic is okay, but having lots of fruit, especially in liquid form on a daily basis, is going to make your diabetes worse, not better. And then what about low-fat or non-fat dairy? So if you're drinking skim milk, that's actually going to make your type 2 diabetes worse. There's no fat in skim milk, so all that's left is the protein, which is good, and lactose, which is a milk sugar that breaks down into galactose and glucose. You remember earlier we were talking about blood glucose levels? So when you drink sugar in the form of skim milk, your blood sugar is going to spike. That's going to make your type 2 diabetes worse, not better. So why is the American Diabetes Association recommending these things? So next is paying attention to portion size. So they want you to eat smaller portions, which is basically sustained semi-starvation for the rest of your life. Nobody can do that. Try not to eat too much of one type of food. So it literally doesn't matter what type of food it is, but you shouldn't eat too much of any type of food. Even though there's a list of hundreds of delicious foods that don't spike your blood sugar at all, you don't want to eat too much of those. Spacing your meals evenly throughout the day. So they want you to eat 3 meals a day with snacks in between. Each of these meals and each of these snacks, they want it to be a high carbohydrate meal or snack. So we're going to keep your blood sugar high all day long. Does that sound like that makes sense for a type 2 diabetic? It doesn't. And then they say not skipping meals. So the American Diabetes Association, they don't want you to fast and skip breakfast or skip dinner. They want you to eat 3 meals a day with 3 snacks in between. There's tons of research that shows that intermittent fasting or longer fasting helps bring your blood sugar back to normal, helps bring your hemoglobin A1C towards normal. So why are they saying don't skip any meals? It's almost as if their goal is not for you to reverse or improve your type 2 diabetes. It feels like they have other goals, but I can't imagine what they would be since they are the American Diabetes Association. On page 8 and 9, they have a spread that shows the classic MyPlate diagram. And they say that you should fill the largest section, so half your plate would be non-starchy vegetables. I don't have a problem with that. That's fine for most type 2 diabetics. And then they say you should fill 1/4 of your plate with starchy foods such as noodles, rice, corn, beans, and potatoes. But wait a minute, earlier we said that starch is just a long chain of sugar molecules stuck together, and that you have an enzyme in your mouth called amylase that starts to break down this starch into sugar, into glucose before you even swallow it. Yet the American Diabetes Association is dedicating 1/4 of your plate to things that are starch rich and basically sugar rich. But they're telling you you must have 1/4 of your plate covered with these starchy foods. Why? Why would they say such a thing? And then the other quarter section is going to be protein foods, such as fish, chicken, eggs, tofu, and lean meat. And then they say fruit, low-fat milk, or low-fat skim yogurt can be part of your diet as well. Again, the lactose in these things are going to spike your blood sugar sky high. Over on the right-hand side of page 9, they actually go into detail about grains and starchy vegetables. They say whole grain breads where whole is the first ingredient, such as whole wheat or whole oats, as if it being a whole grain somehow makes it magically not contain starch, which is sugar. So whether it's highly refined grains or it's whole grains, it's still full of starch. It's still full of sugar. It's going to spike your blood sugar. What is the ADA doing here? Cooked cereals such as oatmeal, grits, hominy, or cream of wheat, all high in starch, all going to spike your blood sugar. Brown rice, whole grain pasta, barley, whole grain tortillas, and whole grain naan, all rich in starch, all going to spike your blood sugar. Potatoes, green peas, corn, lima beans, sweet potatoes, winter squash, all full of starch, all going to spike your blood sugar. And finally, whole grain crackers and fat-free popcorn, as if fat has anything to do with type 2 diabetes at all. Type 2 diabetes is a problem with glucose or sugar and insulin. It has nothing to do with eating fat. So again, whole grain crackers and popcorn are very high in starch and they will raise your blood sugar. So what's the ADA doing here? On page 12, there's more information about checking your blood glucose. Again, they say that you may do that if your provider suggests that or orders that or prescribes that. Again, this is mandatory. If you've been diagnosed with prediabetes or type 2 diabetes, you absolutely need to know what your blood glucose is the majority of the day. So if you eat according to the ADA guidelines and you check your blood sugar an hour later, that's going to give you immediate feedback that, hey, I probably shouldn't have eaten that because that spiked my blood sugar off the charts. But again, they imply that if your doctor orders it, you might want to do that. It's not that big a deal. Page 13 is all about medicine. And there's a big picture of red capsules on the page. And all these questions, how much medicine do I take? How often do I take my medicine? Already indoctrinating you that if you're a type 2 diabetic, you can well and ready expect your physician to get out the prescription pad and write you a prescription for 1 or 2 or 3 pills for your type 2 diabetes, and ultimately a prescription for insulin for your type 2 diabetes, because it's not reversible, it's only manageable, and you can really only manage it with medications. On page 14 is the question, how do you feel? When people are diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, they may have many different emotions, including a sense of loss, anger, fear, shock, sadness, guilt. I agree. But more and more type 2 diabetics are having other emotions, such as a sense of betrayal by the ADA, a feeling of disappointment in the ADA, a feeling of mistrust of the ADA, because as people discover a low carbohydrate diet or a ketogenic diet or a carnivore diet, they find that their type 2 diabetes starts to immediately improve, starts to get better. In fact, in many cases, in hundreds of thousands of cases, as a matter of fact, it completely reverses back to where they have a normal blood glucose and a normal hemoglobin A1C. So the ADA really should be concerned about how type 2 diabetics feel, because many type 2 diabetics are developing negative feelings towards the ADA. On the last page of this helpful little booklet is a link to a website called diabetesfoodhub.org. So .org means it's a nonprofit organization, and it's fully endorsed by the American Diabetes Association. So many diabetics trying to answer the most important question a type 2 diabetic should ask, which is, what the hell should I eat in order to be as healthy as possible? They'll go to diabetesfoodhub.org and they'll look at the recipes. And here are just some of the recipes that they're going to see. Flan, which is delicious, but it has 22 carbohydrates per serving, 19 grams of sugar per serving. And this is on the American Diabetes Association approved diabetesfoodhub.org. They'll also see superfood smoothie. That's got to be healthy, right? Well, it's got 26 total grams of carbohydrate and 14 grams of pure sugar per 1 cup serving. Have you ever just drinking 1 cup of a smoothie? I haven't. I always drink a lot more than that. And then you'll see the blueberry yogurt lemon bars. And these look delicious, but the tiny little serving they recommend, which is like a morsel, contains 10 grams of carbohydrates, 6 grams of sugar, which is a teaspoon and a half of sugar per tiny little serving. And I can promise you, no human being, no adult human on the earth is going to eat just one little square of this delicious little lemon bar. We're going to eat more than that, and that's going to spike our blood sugar sky high. On to the next one, we see mini peach crisps. Mini is actually in the name, meaning a very tiny portion size that no adult human would ever be satisfied eating. These little suckers, which is probably 1 ounce serving, has 20 total grams of carbohydrate, and they don't even tell you how many grams of sugar is in this, because you don't want to know. This is going to spike your blood sugar sky high. And then finally, the high fiber gluten-free brownie. And that has 12 grams of carbohydrate per tiny serving. This little batch is supposed to make 12 servings. In what universe? It has 5 grams of total sugar per tiny little serving. So by giving you these tiny little serving sizes, they're setting you up for failure, because no adult human is going to eat this tiny serving size. We're going to eat 2 or 3 or 4 of these, not because we're gluttons, but because we want to eat food until we're full. And this tiny little morsel is not going to fill us up. They have multiple recipes on this website that are full of sugar, that are full of starch, that are going to raise your hemoglobin A1C and keep your blood sugar sky high and necessitate you having to take more medications. And so this brings us back to the question, what's wrong with the ADA? Are they really trying to help type 2 diabetics have the lowest hemoglobin A1C possible? Or are they trying to help the donors of the ADA, such as the big pharmaceutical corporations that make insulin injections, who donate millions of dollars a year to the ADA? A lot of people accuse the ADA of being in their pocket. Now, I don't believe that. I believe this little booklet is full of just honest mistakes. I don't think that they're in bed with Big Pharma. All these recipes are full of grains and sugar and other sweet things that are going to spike your blood sugar. They're full of potatoes and full of pasta. Surely, I mean, they also get millions of dollars of donations from highly processed big food manufacturers. But I don't think there's a conspiracy here. I think these are just honest mistakes by the ADA. I really think they have the best interest of every type 2 diabetic to heart, but they've somehow gotten confused on what type 2 diabetes is and what the proper foods should be that a type 2 diabetic eats, and also whether you need medicine or not as a type 2 diabetic. I'm not attacking the American Diabetes Association. I'm just confused by their definition of type 2 diabetes that they give to every newly diagnosed type 2 diabetic. Why would you want to confuse type 2 diabetics right off the bat with an inappropriate, inaccurate definition of type 2 diabetes? Why would you want to plow the field and fertilize the field of future prescription medications? Why would you even bring that up for a newly diagnosed type 2 diabetic? Why wouldn't you focus 100% on food and helping them understand, hey, you can keep this under control with food for the rest of your life. You never need to take a prescription. But they don't do that. And I'm very confused by that. The fact of the matter is that Miss Tracy Brown, who's the current CEO of the American Diabetes Association, she controls her type 2 diabetes with a low-carb diet. But yet they don't want to talk about that for newly diagnosed type 2 diabetics. Miss Brown, who I have great respect for, she talked about her low-carb diet and how it worked great for her on a podcast. And then she hasn't mentioned it since, almost as if someone reached out to her and said, hey, ixnay on the low-carb A, okay? That's not helping anybody. And by anybody, I don't think they meant type 2 diabetics, because it would definitely help them. And actually, I'd love to extend an invitation to Miss Tracy Brown right now to have a live discussion with me on this YouTube channel, on my Facebook page, wherever. I would love to pick her brain about how she uses a low carbohydrate diet to control her type 2 diabetes and how that works great for her. And why doesn't the American Diabetes Association put anything about a low carbohydrate diet in the very first booklet that they give to newly diagnosed type 2 diabetics? Why is the only thing they want to talk about prescription medications and high carbohydrate foods? Please explain that to me, Tracy Brown, or anyone at the American Diabetes Association. This is an open invitation. I don't want to debate with you. I don't want to argue with you. I just want to discuss this and chat with you and try to help people understand why you, Ms. Brown, use a low-carb diet to control your diabetes, but it doesn't seem to be good enough for all the other newly diagnosed type 2 diabetics. Please, come on and let's chat about this. Inconsistencies like we discussed in this little booklet, they happen ubiquitously throughout medical practice. And that's why I've made it my mission in life to reach as many normal people as I can to try to help them understand that very often the medical advice you are given, the nutrition advice you're given, is incorrect. And it will, first of all, not help you be healthier, but it might even harm your health. That's why I do what I do. And if you'd like to support me so that I can reach even more people, please sign up on patreon.com. It's a super quick sign up, and you can throw $1 or $2 my way so that I have more time and more resources and a larger reach so that I can reach out and help newly diagnosed type 2 diabetics so that they never have to suffer from the disastrous complications that are going to come from a life of a high carbohydrate, multi-prescription type 2 diabetic life. This is Dr. Berry. I'll see you next time.